13.7 million views in 48 hours. That's when I realized what was happening. That UN speech hadn't just been a political statement, it had been a psychological breakthrough. For generations, Africans had been conditioned to apologize for taking up space, to apologize for demanding fair treatment, to apologize for refusing to be grateful for scraps from the master's table. But in one moment, in front of the entire world, I had said, no more apologies. And suddenly, millions of people remembered they had been waiting their entire lives for permission to stop apologizing. Permission I had just given them. 3 weeks later, something happened that the Western press tried desperately to ignore. African governments began receiving unprecedented levels of citizen engagement. Not protests, not complaints, participation. In Senegal, thousands of young people applied to join the civil service. In Tanzania, diaspora Africans began returning home to start businesses. In Ethiopia, universities reported record enrollment in engineering and technology programs. In Botswana, agricultural cooperatives saw membership increase by 340%. People weren't just inspired by defiance, they were inspired by possibility. The possibility that they could build something without asking for permission, that they could create value without Western validation, that they could solve their own problems with their own resources. But perhaps the most significant change happened in our own country. 6 months after the UN speech, Burkina Faso achieved something unprecedented in modern African history: complete food security, not through foreign aid, not through development. Programs managed by European NOS, through Burkinabe farmers, using Burkinabe knowledge on Burkinabe land. The agricultural techniques our ancestors had perfected over centuries, techniques that Western experts had dismissed as primitive, turned out to be perfectly adapted to our climate and soil. When we stopped listening to outsiders telling us how to farm our own land, our harvests doubled. When we stopped importing seeds designed for European climates, our crops became more resilient. When we stopped apologizing for our traditional methods, we discovered they were better than anything the World Bank had recommended. The symbolism was intentional. The same country whose president refused to apologize to the UN was now feeding itself without UN assistance. By the 1-year anniversary of that speech, the transformation was undeniable. 17 African countries had renegotiated their resource extraction agreements. 23 had established sovereign wealth funds to capture more value from their natural resources. 31 had launched indigenous technology initiatives, and 42 had signed bilateral agreements with each other, creating intra-African trade relationships that bypassed Western intermediaries. The African Continental Free Trade Area, which had been stalled for years, suddenly accelerated implementation, not because of government negotiations, but because millions of ordinary Africans were demanding it. They had heard their president refuse to apologize for African excellence, and they decided they wanted to experience that excellence for themselves. But here's what really kept Western strategists awake at night: the